Hi, I'm Anjanette Fraser. I'm a registered nutritional therapist, and today we're going to be cooking spinach and chickpea curry. Now the first thing that we need to do is obviously make sure we've got a nice hot hob here. So I'm going to put my saucepan on. Everything's all hopefully set up. You might recognise some of these ingredients. Hopefully have most of them in your cupboards already. So the first thing we're going to do is just to heat some oil. About a tablespoon, not too much, but just a little bit just to get the heat going. Nice and hot. And then I'm going to chop, what I've chosen today is a red onion. So the thing about red onion, you can of course choose any other onion you want. You can choose good old brown onions, that's fine, white onions. I have a slight preference for red because I think there's additional benefits in red. From a nutrition point of view, it's actually got slightly better antioxidant value. And we're talking about things like quercetin. So that helps us anti-age, as it were. So I kind of chop it quite finely, up to you how thick you chop it. And this recipe we're using today is for 2 people. So I'm going to use 1 onion. You can obviously use half if you're not too keen on onions. In fact, you know what? You can even substitute it for a leek if you like, because they're all from the same family. They're all from the allium family. So similar sort of flavour, similar properties in terms of nutrition, but I think also as well as the antioxidant value of a red one, it's also got a bit of colour, which helps. So what I'm going to do, hopefully this oil is now nice and hot, it's been on there a minute or so. I'm going to pop the red onion, whole red onion, there we go, into the saucepan. And what we're going to do is just cook this just until it starts to soften and until it starts to go a bit brown. And if you're anything like me at this moment in time, you're wishing you had sunglasses on, because you know the thing about onion, it does make you look like you're crying, doesn't it? So I'm going to cook the onion here, give it a couple of minutes to cook, break it down a little bit. Whilst it's doing that, I'll talk you through the next couple of things that I'm going to do. So in addition to the red onion, you'll also see here I've got a green chilli. So it's totally up to you whether you include this. This is optional. If you like it a bit spicy, then sure, include some chilli. Whether you want a red one as well, up to you entirely. So I'm just going to top and tail it and take the seeds out of it. A little tip that someone once taught me is to wear your rubber gloves whilst doing the chilli, because they sometimes can be really strong. But seeing as we're on video, I'm not wearing gloves today. So I'm just going to strip the seeds out of the chilli as well. Just takes a few seconds. Sometimes the seeds can be extra hot, so it's probably a better idea to take them out. We don't need them for this recipe. There we go. Right, and then I'm going to finely chop this. I don't particularly want large sections of chilli in there. And keep stirring the onions, so you obviously don't want them to brown, overly brown and go burnt. That would not be a good start to your meal. The good thing about this meal, and why we've chosen this one, is that this is just showing you how quick and simple it can be to cook a really healthy meal that's cheap as well. When we talk through the ingredients, you'll see that none of them are expensive, and they're all from your supermarket, nothing from health food stores, etc. So readily available. Quickly chop this, as quick as I can, chop this chilli. Okay, and I'm going to add this to the curry, to the onions. So I'm going to cook all that together. I'm also going to add, now in the recipe I think it says 6 garlic cloves, but I've got some quite big ones here, so I'm just going to choose 3 today. Obviously depending upon whether you like garlic or not, you might not. So obviously I've got a crusher here. Now another little interesting nutrition tip for you. Garlic, as we know, is really great for us. It's great for lowering our cholesterol. It's great for your heart health. But one other tip about it, which I'm clearly not demonstrating very well, it's normally easy to crush, but this is an extra big one. There we go. Right, the thing about garlic, to actually release its nutritional value, is to crush it. Because it's got a medicinal property within it called allicin, which is when you crush it, it's activated. So of course, yeah, you could add garlic just as a clove into your Sunday roast, into a stew, whatever, and that's great because you get the flavour. But you miss out on the extra little added bit just by crushing it. If you haven't got a crusher, you could just finely chop it, to be honest. But for ease, I'm crushing it today. So I've got 3 here that I'm going to add. But as I say, you can just add 1 if you're not a big fan of garlic. That's fine. Right, there it goes. All of it's in. Right, so we've got our red onion in there. That's all softened. We've got our green chilli, finely chopped. And we've got our crushed garlic in there. Okay. All beginning to make a nice smell. I'm feeling hungry already. Right, so next, we're going to add some other ingredients. What will we add next? Let's go for the seasonings here and the herbs. So the first thing I've got is ginger, about half a teaspoonful. I'm just going to add that in. I've got cumin, okay, add a bit of that in. I've got half a teaspoonful of ground coriander to go in as well. I've got 1 teaspoonful of Garam masala to go in. And the last teaspoonful, very neatly lined up they were, is turmeric. So hopefully you've heard of most of these spices. Turmeric, particularly at the moment, is very popular. Social media goes mad for turmeric, and possibly rightly so. There's some good clinical evidence. It's very anti-inflammatory. To be honest though, I don't actually know at which point it does have massive anti-inflammatory properties. You probably would need to consume quite a bit. In this example here, we've used half a teaspoonful, which is a reasonable amount, but you probably have to include it a few times a week in there to have some real benefit. Now, I can add to this 1 tablespoon of tomato puree. Okay, so you could have tomato paste, that's fine. Tomato paste is just a bit more concentrated, a bit drier, so you may need to add a bit more water if you're going to be doing that. And we're going to be adding some tinned tomatoes in a minute. So I'm just going to squeeze into here 1 tablespoon amount of tomato puree, pop that in, just for a bit more concentrated tomato flavour. Stir that in. And then I'm also going to add to the mix at this point how big is this? 200 or 400? 400 gram tinned tomatoes. There we go. And here I've got the same size, so another 400 grams. This one is of chickpeas. Okay, now the chickpeas have already been rinsed and washed. Okay, so that all the juice is gone. I've drained them, so this is just them just going in just now. I've not tried it yet, but people tell me that apparently you can make nice meringues from chickpea juice. Apparently if you blend it and whisk it at a fast speed, it can make perfect meringues. So if you've got someone who's intolerant to eggs, for example, that may well be a really good solution for you. Okay, right, give that a good mix all around. What else have we got to add in there? Right, I'm going to add a bit more liquid in there. So I've got 200 mils of water. Just turn that down a little bit. And I'm going to add a vegetable stock cube in there. You can use any kind of stock cube you like. So we've got a vegetable stock here, but you can also just use a liquid vegetable stock, any particular brand you like. Of course, you may see some brands here, but you don't have to pick any of these brands. You can go for whichever brand is in your supermarket, that's fine. So I'm going to keep a little bit back, just in case I put too much in. But the idea now is basically just to turn the heat up and just to give it a good stir, mix it all in, get all those flavours binding together. So you don't need to use a lid, okay? You just leave the lid off and just let it boil away to itself. So once I've given that a good stir and a double check I've got all my ingredients, I think we're good to go. Right, you'll see perhaps from behind me here, I've got spinach, I've got baby leaf spinach. I haven't included this yet because this comes towards the end. And I've also got a small packet of pine nuts, which, yeah, okay, shall we include it? Yeah, come on then, let's go for it. So pine nuts, you can add in, up to you, I'd probably say a good tablespoon amount, something like that. Now the reason why I'm adding in pine nuts and why it's optional, of course there's people out there with nut allergies, okay? But also from a nutrition point of view, it would be most unusual if when you speak to a nutritionist, they didn't mention the word protein. So protein is crucial from any nutritionist point of view. And the reason why protein is important is because it fills you for longer and it gives you more energy. So if you eat meat, you eat animal products, then that's fine. You get protein from any animal product. So for example, you could make today's recipe, but you could add in sliced chicken into this recipe, and that could be great, okay? If you're not particularly into vegetarian meals, you could add some chicken in there. Possibly, you might want to add maybe some whitefish. You could maybe chop up some cod or some haddock or maybe some river cobbler or something like that. And I wouldn't add it quite at this stage if it's fish, because fish doesn't need as long to cook as, say, chicken does. So if you're going to do chicken, I would maybe actually, slice it and perhaps brown it off first before you start doing all of this and then add it at this point. Obviously we want to make sure that the chicken is well cooked. So in today's example, we're not adding chicken in, okay? This is more about a vegetarian meal. So when we're talking about protein, because it's got no animal products in there, it's actually slightly deficient in terms of protein. It won't fill you for too long, maybe for a short while, but not for very long. So from a nutrition point of view, what can you do to improve its nutritional value and its protein content? Well, the key thing is a protein is made up of 22 amino acids, okay? Bit technical, but stick with me, okay? So these 22 amino acids, 9 of them are what we call essential, which means our body can't make them, so we need to get them from food. Now, if you eat any animal product, you'll get all 9. So you could have chicken, you could have eggs, milk, cheese, yogurt, etc. All of those are animal products, so they all have a complete source of protein. So what you need to do, and this is where you may need a pen and paper, is to combine at least 2 of the following in the meal, okay? And these include nuts, seeds, peas, beans, lentils, and grains. Okay, so 6 different sources there. If you combine any 2 of those in the same meal, you get more complete protein. Okay, so for example, in this meal we're making now, we've got chickpeas. Okay, so that's 1, so we need 1 more. So by just adding in the pine nuts, we've got a chickpea and we've got a nut, a pea and a nut. So we're getting a better source of protein by adding those 2 things in there. Okay. You could play around with the recipe, to be honest. If you didn't want to add pine nuts, what else could you add? Maybe some lentils, something like that might work. Or some barley, maybe. You can maybe even serve it with rice, okay, because rice is a grain. Or you could even serve it with something called quinoa, or some people pronounce it quinoa. And quinoa is actually, although it is a grain, it looks like a grain, it's actually a source of protein, whereas all other grains are not, they're carbohydrates. So quinoa is cheap, readily available in your supermarkets, next to all the lentils and peas and beans, etc. But it's a really, really good source of protein for vegetarians. And you cook it just like rice. So you basically just boil it in water, and it takes about the same amount of time as rice. So you could maybe serve this meal with some quinoa, or you could serve it with rice, therefore making it a better protein value, so it's going to fill you for longer. So I'll let this cook for about 20 minutes in total, and I want to quickly run through some of the other ingredients and some of the ingredients we've already included and why I've included them. You've got ginger was the first thing that I included. Now ginger is really good for stimulating your appetite, Okay, gets your stomach really ready for digesting your food, but it's also very warming. So very good for the winter cold months as well. You've got cumin and coriander. Yeah, some nutritional value, but not so well known perhaps as turmeric, as we talked about already. The anti-inflammatory benefits of turmeric. To be honest, I should have mentioned ginger. You know, we've got dried ginger here just for convenience. It lasts longer in your cupboard, but equally you could use grated fresh ginger, which actually may be slightly nicer. If you've got time and you quite like ginger and you're happy to use it a couple of times a week so it doesn't go off in your fridge, you could finely grate some ginger instead of using the ground ginger. So the other items, we've got the tomato puree and we've got the tinned tomatoes. Now, in terms of nutritional value, the thing about tomatoes is they're very high in something called lycopene. Now, lycopene is a very good antioxidant, so it's anti-aging again, but a lot of people may know it more for its benefits in terms of eyesight. So lycopene is meant to reduce the incidence of something called macular degeneration, which is very common, particularly in elderly people. As we get older, the behind our eye, the macula starts to disintegrate, and what happens is, people may not notice it at first, but it's a bit, it's hard to describe. It's basically where the centre of your vision starts to fade and go a bit blurred, and so you only just see around the periphery of your vision. So lycopene, found in tomatoes, is very good for reducing the incidence of that, trying to halt it if you've already started on that road. And the interesting thing about lycopene is it's activated in tomatoes when they're cooked. Okay, so tomatoes, we always think about foods being, from a nutrition point of view, having a higher nutritional value when they're raw. But actually, tomatoes is one of the few which gets better as it's cooked. So when we think about tomato puree, this has already been cooked. And we're obviously cooking the tinned tomatoes here. So we're helping our eyesight with this menu. We're also making ourselves a bit younger with all the antioxidant value. And the chickpeas, well, if you're vegetarian, you know a lot about these guys already. Chickpeas are a fantastic source of fibre. As we've learnt, they are really good source of helping you get to your correct protein level. And yeah, the juice can be used to cook meringues. So a good source of fibre, and very important for a lot of people. What else have we got here? Olive oil. Okay, so I started the session with, this is extra virgin olive oil. Okay, now things may change over time. They often do. But at the moment, scientific studies are suggesting that extra virgin olive oil is the best oil to cook with. And why is that? Well, that's because in tests, it's the oil which is its chemical bonds stay in position at greater heat compared to other oils. So let's say, for example, to use a vegetable oil, its chemical bonds are likely to break and become a more dangerous type of oil at temperatures compared to an extra virgin olive oil. The other one at the moment, which is getting a lot of attention, is coconut oil. And I'll give you that, yeah, okay, I would be quite happy if you use coconut oil, or this one, or both, whichever. Coconut oil is new onto the scene, and I don't think we fully understand it yet. Historically, we used to think that it was bad for us because it's high in saturated fats. And historically, we've always been told, haven't we, that saturated fats are bad for us because it actually increases our cholesterol. But more recently, they've actually said, and interestingly, that coconut oil actually increases your HDL, which is your good cholesterol. But we can't get our heads around the fact that how it can actually improve your cholesterol, and yet it's a saturated fat. So school's out a little bit on that one. So I'll leave that one with you as to which one you prefer to use. But as a nutrition point of view, it's all about a balanced diet, about as much variety as possible. So sometimes use that, sometimes use coconut, that's great. Okay. And from my point of view as well, I'm not a vegetarian, but once or twice a week, I like to cook a vegetarian meal. I like to stretch myself, new recipes, but just to give my body as much variety as I can, different vitamins and minerals. and therefore, you know, you're going to just be a bit healthier. Your diet's going to be a bit more balanced. I'm going to add the remaining little bit of stock that I left. I'm just actually going to put it in here now because it's thickening up nicely now. Make it a little bit thinner. And hopefully from this video, as you'll see, that this is actually really simple and easy to make. And it's just about little changes. We're not after dramatic things, you know. No big changes. Big changes aren't always sustainable. We want small changes. So, what else have we got that I haven't talked about? I haven't talked about spinach. Okay, so we'll add that, as I say, towards the end. The reason I've put spinach in there is spinach is a fantastic source of iron. Now, the good thing about it, or the interesting thing about it, it's actually what's called a non-heme iron source. So if you think about like red meat, okay, red meat is a good source of heme iron, which means that it's readily available for your body to absorb. But in terms of green stuff like kale, spinach, etc., it's non-heme, which means actually it's not so easy for us to absorb the iron. So what we need to do, one very cool synergistic benefit, is adding some vitamin C. So if you're thinking about salads, and you're thinking about maybe adding some baby spinach into your salad, a good squeeze of like lemon juice, which is obviously high in vitamin C. You might have some peppers in there, that's also high in vitamin C, just to help you make the iron more available to your body to absorb. In terms of what we've got in here today, we've got the tomatoes, which are a really, really good source of vitamin C. So by combining the spinach, we're getting iron, okay, which many vegetarians and vegans possibly are deficient in because of not consuming red meat. But it's also high in vitamin K, which is helpful for blood clotting for people if their blood's a bit thin. I'd probably say actually for a lot of people who are into smoothies at the minute, a lot of people are putting greens into their smoothies every day. Not a good idea if your blood is a bit thick and more prone to clotting, just to be aware of that, okay? Because as I say, it's quite high in vitamin K, which does clot. But every now and then is a good inclusion in your diet. And the last thing that I've got, you may see behind me, is a natural live yoghurt. And we're going to use this towards the end just when we serve it. Any brand is fine, preferably not a low-fat one. The exception would be a Greek yoghurt, okay, because most yogurts, commercial yogurts, if they say low-fat, it generally means that they've added more sugar in there just to improve the flavour. And obviously that's not what we're after. So just a natural yoghurt. One that's live, so it's got live cultures would be even better, because we're not actually going to cook it, so they're going to stay alive. We're just going to add it at the end, just as a little dollop on the top, okay? But yeah, something that's live and natural would be a good choice. I've never tried it with Greek yogurt to see what it tastes like. You could maybe, okay? A 0% fat Greek yogurt might work. I'm open to suggestions, it may be. Okay. So I think in terms of, we've talked about all the ingredients, and let's have a look at it. Now it's nearly ready. Okay, so this has had about 15-20 minutes. It's gone to a nice thicker consistency. A lot of the juice is evaporated, which is what I wanted. Okay. Now if you find actually that you've gone 15-20 minutes and the chickpeas aren't quite cooked, you've tried one and they're still a bit well, dense, but not too soft in texture, then you can always add a bit more water in there, a bit more boiled water, just to cook it for a little bit longer, okay? So what I'm going to do now is, now that we're finished, now that all the cooking bit's done, I'm going to take my baby spinach. Yeah, I only need, funny thing about spinach, it actually looks quite a lot, but when you cook, as you'll probably, if you've used it before, it actually shrinks an awful lot. So don't be alarmed by how much I'm putting in there. This is very kind of normal. Okay, so I'm going to put about half a bag in there. It looks a lot at first, but trust me. Okay, so I put half a bag or so in there, and then I'm going to give it a good stir. And as I say, if you cook spinach before, you know it just really wilts down. So the heat in this saucepan is going to start to wilt the spinach. And it's going to give it some lovely colours. You know, we've got some, I'll show you in a second when I serve it. It's got some beautiful, really strong greens, some reds, touch of yellow from the chickpeas. A couple more seconds just to wilt a bit more. And actually, worth saying at this point as well, you don't have to have fresh spinach. You know, you can have frozen spinach, and it comes in like little cubes, looks a bit like ice cube sort of size. You can chuck them in as well. Easy to use. In terms of, you know, storage and cost, there's no waste, is there? Because a lot of people actually just end up throwing a lot of their leafy greens away. If you buy it frozen, it's of no less nutritional value at all. You know, it's just the same. So that's maybe a top little tip. Instead of fresh spinach, you could always just buy the frozen stuff. Right, so that's all wilted away nicely. So to serve it, over here I have my bowl. So I'm just going to turn this off now that I've finished. And I'm going to serve. Serving's never been my strong point, so forgive me for this one. Fortunately for you, I'm better at cooking than serving. Serve a bowl full of this. I'll give you an idea as portion size, okay? Because I get asked that a lot about portion sizes. What's the right amount? I'll show you, because this is, you know, we've been cooking here today for 2 people, so it's approximately half the amount. Now I'm going to take that live natural yoghurt that I talked about, and I'm going to give it a really generous dollop right on the top, okay? Maybe even 2. You can add a bit more if you like. If you find that it's too spicy, by the way, too hot, there's too much chilli in there, add a bit more yoghurt, okay? It takes the heat out of it a little bit. So I'm going to add my yoghurt. Excuse me, licking my finger. And then I'm going to add, I've got to the side of me here, some coriander as well, just for a bit of decoration. Coriander, of course, we've got it in the curry, but this just makes it look a little bit more attractive. Right. What do you reckon, guys? Does this look good to eat or what? So for more information, you can visit our website for some more recipes, and you can also see more of me on our Eat and Exercise for Energy course, where you can find out more recipes, do more practical cooking suggestions, and you can also find out a lot more about nutrition. I hope you're going to enjoy this meal. I know certainly I will.